we were speaking about a physics of quality and the physics of quantity. Here we want to introduce the physics of quality, and we have seen that the monochord is a sort of a convergent thing between quantity and quality, and the monochord, actually a pendular instrument is half a monochord. When we spoke, for example, about this transformation, when Pythagoras spoke about the music of the spheres, for example, just a word, when he says it, we should keep thinking. Just the word music of the spheres has in it, it includes everything about astrology and astronomy are included in this sentence. So, because you know how we are speaking here about when the celestial bodies move, the geometrical angles between them influence the energy, all the energy patterns. And what we feel is not the angles. See, what we feel is the quality of the energy in the sky at that moment. So the movement is making a sort of a qualitative effect. That means, in other words, what is an expression of quality is music. So you can say the music of the spheres, it explains in just one sentence, it explains this, what astrology is explained in this sentence. You know, here in America, you like to say the 1 minute manager, the 1 minute thing, and all that. So Pythagoras is here is the 10 seconds astrology, music of the spheres. Now, this quantity versus quality, when we spoke about harmonics, I want to know exactly the difference first. How can we shift our awareness from quantity to quality? Because really it's a very simple shift of awareness. It doesn't take much more than that. I'll make an example of what a quantitative measurement is. Let's say you have something like this, and something would be moving at different speeds like that. This is just any diagram to show something going from small to big. Now, in a quantitative way, I can perceive here what my instruments can measure. So I can go in that direction, and the more sensitive my instruments become to smaller things, I can set a perception here. Then I invent new instruments and I move it a bit that way. And then in this direction, I go to the bigger things. So it is, because quantitative means what? Means the ability to measure. So it's the ability of my instruments of measurements. So you see, there is a limit. And this limits quantitatively. This is what sort of makes the artificial separation between physical and sort of non-physical, or physical and metaphysical, or whatever. All what's outside there, as long as we can't measure it. Because we think today that what we can measure is scientific. But this is completely wrong, because science is not measurement. Measurement is just a tool in the hand of science. Scientific is a certain way of looking at things. Science is a way of understanding something. For example, when you see a phenomena, something happens, and you see that if I do these 3 steps in this specific way, produces that phenomena. And if I repeat it 10 times and produces the same phenomena, this is scientific thinking. It's that simple. I don't have to measure. I don't have to measure at all. Because what I do could be measurable or could not be measurable. See? So if every time I lift this leg up like that, I'm out of balance, and I do it 10 times, I'm out of balance, then having two legs is related to balance or something like that. You see, if I move my, it's very simple. Just observe something 3-4 times, and this is scientific. So scientific is our way of observation. That's how all science started. Observation of certain phenomena, and then the details or the steps that lead to that phenomena. Then we have scientific method. Whether we measure it or not is beside the question. But now we somehow forgot all the simple things. Now we tell everybody, if I can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Now, if you say, I'm sad, I can't measure it, it's not scientific. It doesn't exist for me. That's you, as if that is your way of, a subjective way of feeling something, but it's completely irrelevant or non-existent for me because I can't measure it. But there is something very strange here. In science, normal science, we say everything, what we can measure and what we cannot, everything in the universe is energy. That means nothing can be, nothing within time and space can be not energy. And then I come and say, okay, are your feelings of sadness now, is that a form of energy? Oh, no, forget, I mean, we're speaking about electricity, heat, things, conversion like that. How come? I mean, didn't we just define energy? Didn't we say everything is energy? Doesn't the dictionary, if you take any encyclopedia or dictionary and see definition of energy, it says the ability to produce an effect. It depends on the language. It could be either the ability to produce an action, ability to produce an effect, it's the ability, not actual producing it. We always think of energy as something already producing an effect. Like when, because our mind goes to Einstein, E mc squared, something moving. Not necessary. You see, it's the ability. Because the fuel in your car has energy. Also when the car is there, it doesn't have to move. It still has energy. So it's the ability. Now, when she says I'm sad, that means that there is something happening to the emotional energy there. Now you tell me, if you tell me emotions are not a form of energy, then how come? Because since everything in the universe is energy, then nothing can be not energy, you see. But if her emotions are energy, then I can actually convert it. I can store it. I can amplify it. See? You tell me, oh no, this is too absurd. Well, it's either energy or it's not energy. If it is that way, then we should be able really to go into it, and from a scientific point of view, it should be treated like any other energy, converted to any other energy. I mean, you might feel, if you're very angry, you might feel some heat in your body. This conversion of a feeling to heat. I mean, it's very simple. But somehow, all things that produce an effect that are of subjective nature, we tend to discard them out of the form, but you can't. It is part of it. Now, we said this is limited, so quantitative, quantity, quantitative is, first of all, limited by our instruments. It's always a range, from to, always. And then there's another thing. When you go the speed here or the size here, if we are saying it's increasing, then what you find here is different than what was before it and different than what's coming. So there's no repetition here. You see, it's just 5 is different than 6, it's different than 7, different than 8, different than 9. There's no repetition. Now, let's take if we look at it in a qualitative way. if these were the strings of an instrument, strings like that, then you could say, okay, the length of the string here, the mathematical length of every string is different than the other. There's no repetition here. But let's look at it in another way. Before I look at it in another way, I'll tell you a small joke to wake you up after lunch, you know. Somebody was there at night, it was very dark, and he went under the light and he's looking for something in the ground. Then another person comes and says, what are you looking for? Can I help you? He says, I'm looking for a key. I lost my key. He says, where exactly did you lose it? He says, well, over there. Then he says, well, why are you looking here? He says, because over there it's dark and here is light. Okay, logically, it sounds absurd, okay? But this is, when you understand this type of joke, this is a Sufi joke. That means it's a joke that illustrates a mystical concept. So what could be behind it? Now, if I had a musical instrument like that, let's say piano, with the different chords, and I have anything, let's say some dust or something on a chord here, or a coin on a chord here, but I have only a small part here that's uncovered, and all this part is covered. I don't see it. Can I, if it's a musical instrument, connect with this chord through the part that's visible? One of the 7 will be in connection with it. So, because octaves, they move every note, every 7th, there's a sort of repetition. So all I have to do is hit one of the 7 chords, try each one, and then one of them will make the coin fall. So I don't have to go there, I can still interact with it. So quality means repetition of a certain quality. You see, when we say scale of qualities, it will not be a scale where things start from, let's say, 0 or something and increase. No, it's a kind of scale. Qualitative scales is a quality that keeps repeating itself. And because in a musical instrument, you know, when they name the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, or C, D, G, when they name them, and then after 7 notes they started again, it isn't because somebody was naming them and he ran out of letters, so he decided to start again, you know. Then you say, okay, why didn't he number them from 1 to 100? It would be easier. Today in a computer world, it's easier to number them. But physics tells us very simple. Just hit one chord, and every 8th string is going to enter into resonance with it. Now, it sounds different. It's not the same sound. But when you somehow, it's in resonance with it. So it must be similar in a way. Now, for a normal person, it's a different note. It's a different sound. And somehow in a relationship. Now, for somebody who starts playing music for a year or something like that, he's been playing it, so somehow his emotions are interacting with the notes. See, he gains certain sensitivity. Now, you hit any note, this do or this do and this do, and he tell you, oh, this is a do, this is do, this is do. To him, they're the same now because you feel them the same. So here, there is a repetitive thing. This is very important because repetitive, that means it will keep going, this relationship, and this relationship is very important. This is resonance. Now remember this word well, because this is, from now on, it's going to be your middle name, okay? Everyone will have resonance as his middle name. This is very, very important. Because resonance is communication, is being. You'll see how wonderful word of resonance is. Now, when resonance happens, this communication here, it is not limited by anything. You see, even if your musical instrument is limited, this will go, resonance will go here to infinity to the smallest and to infinity to the biggest, you see. So actually what happens when you make any action, hit any note here, the one you hear, the audible sound, is limited to a certain audible range. But the resonance effect is unlimited from the minutest to the largest. So the whole universe is constantly in tune. That's harmonics. If you play just, if I start doing this, see? Doing this, just doing anything like that, then you think this is not heard outside this room. Now, the whole universe will somehow enter into resonance with this pulse, all things that are similar to this. And this will explain something very important to you. You think that when you, all repetitive things like meditation, when you do repetitive things, or in India they have forms of meditation, we have forms of meditation, we use rosaries like that in our hand, or sometimes count on the fingers like this, but all over the world we have a type of meditation that has to be with rhythm. Even African drums or things like that, anything that has to do with rhythm is a form of meditation. Now, the first thing we understand that meditation is a way when you introduce a rhythm to the mind, like that, it will slow the mind, somehow stop it from wandering and produce this silence. So it's a way of stilling. In reality, it's not a way of stilling. In reality, by making a rhythm, you start communication. You see? So any rhythm, the moment a rhythm means you're connecting to the beginning, to the universe, from the largest to the smallest. So actually, meditation is all about connection with the whole universe. You're in tune with the whole universe. It's not, it's this tuning with the whole universe that, if done well, really overwhelms your individuality into the sort of omnipresence feeling. It is because in you, the universe has manifested inside you all of a sudden. So you become that small. So you become present. It's not that your mind has stopped. It's not a way of stealing the mind. It's a way of calling in. It's a way of being the universe. And from the quantitative point of view, you see, because if we say we are like an iceberg, where so much is visible and so much is invisible. So if the 9/10 that is invisible is in tune with the universe, it becomes a copy of the universe. So actually, if 9/10 of me is the universe and the physical body is only 1/10, then I am the universe and not the physical body, you see. I only own now 10% of the shares. The rest belong to the universe. So this is, harmonics was considered one of the most secret sciences. Not looking at it from the musical point of view, but looking at it from other point of views of how you can harness the powers of nature through harmonics. And this is the basics of qualitative measurement. Now, what happens when we speak about resonance now? Look at the chords or the strings. If you hit one, during resonance, they're all moving together like this. Now, I'm simplifying it, of course, and taking only 8 chords. Those who study music, you know that you have secondary and tertiary effects in there. You have a secondary effect that goes to 16 notes with it and all that give the quality of the sound itself and the sound box. But we're simplifying. We're taking the main one for simplicity. Now, that means here, when two things are in resonance, we look at it that way. Sometimes we can draw it that way. We draw, let's say, a wave, and then we draw another one like this. And we say when they're in resonance, there's a very simple way. You know, we superimpose the points of one onto the other like that, and we superimpose them and somehow come with a resultant. And during resonance, both will behave according to the resultant. What does that mean? If this one was like this, now it behaves like this. If this one was like this, it behaves like this. Any change is information. So what's happening? Resonance means information exchange. So all the information of this one is into this one. So you see, now any rhythm produces information exchange with the whole universe. All we need to now is be able to tune into whatever we want. But in general, it is there. So see, the science, physics of quality is so wonderful that if you really start living it or using it, it will become much, much more exciting than all what we have discovered or done today in our physics of quantity in the modern technology. Because we can do so much more with this one. Now, this repetitive thing also has another thing related to our being, our psychology. When you work quantitatively, things are changing in such a way that what is finished, will not come back. You see, the 6, I'm in the 6, the 5 is finished, and I'm in the 6, and the next one is the 7, so it's not the 6 anymore. So if I'm standing at the 6, I have lost the 5. I have a feeling of loss for the 5 because it's not, I was in it, but now it's gone. And what's coming is not a 6 or a 5. It's a new thing. It's a 7, and I don't know how it will feel. So you see, quantitative perception of time carries in it stress, carries in it some fear of what is being lost, and some fear of the unknown. It's normal. Like in your birthday, you come in your birthday, you count the years, you say I'm growing old and all that. But if you're really concentrating not on your age, but on the presents you get in your birthday, then you know that every year the birthday, oh, the party, I see my friends, I'm getting the present. Now you know that last year you had it, so it must be here this year, and it will be there next year. You never lose it. So it depends how you look at it. Now let's see another way of doing that. Now a farmer, he will automatically have a different perception of time. A farmer will not look at this year is 202 and next year is 203. He will not say this year I'm 22 and next year I'm 23. No, he will look at it differently. He will look at it as this is winter. Okay, it was there before and it's going to be there again. Now this is spring. Nothing is being lost, you see, and what's coming is known because he knows this spring is like last spring, see, and he's not losing it, and I'm not losing it, it's just being transforming. I'm getting, instead of saying now spring is going into summer, I'm not losing spring because spring is coming again. So in this there's no feeling of loss, there's a feeling of, when you look at qualities, it is somehow you get like an eternal present where you're not afraid of losing anything. You get an overview, because the moment you say the quality of spring, now it's here, you know that summer's coming, you know that winter's past, so you get this overview. This overview gives you when you feel an eternal presence of things, nothing will be lost. It's just cyclic, it's coming. You feel a certain relaxation inside you. There's no fear. Instead of fear, there is a wisdom. Wisdom comes out because when something keeps repeating itself so many times, you start noticing things. Now, when you start noticing things, you develop a wisdom, a natural wisdom in life. And this way of looking at things, you see, it's the same human being. When he's working in agriculture, he is living in this time. When he's working out in a sort of a man-made thing, all of a sudden he's using quantitative time, and he's into stress, and he's into fear, and he's into all things. So it doesn't take much. All it takes is changing your perception. Now, your left brain perception will always give you the quantitative. Your right brain perception will always give you the qualitative. So it's a way of moving into qualities of things. Qualities never go away. They're repeatable. They're connected to the whole universe. Now, qualities, communication in qualitative physics is different than communication in quantitative. In communication, if you want to communicate, in quantitative manners, it's totally different than in qualitative. In quantitative, there is me and you, and something moves from here to there and from here to there. This is quantitative communication. Either I send you a radio wave or something has to go, something has to come. I send, and even when we speak about healing, when we speak about energy, because we are trained quantitatively, we think I'm sending healing energy, I'm receiving. It doesn't work that way at all. You can't explain quantitative and qualitative. Okay, you say yes, but I feel I have lost that amount of energy and the other person has gained that amount of energy. Okay, yes, it's true. But you shouldn't think that something moved between you and the person. Maybe there's another way. Maybe there's resonance. It's a totally different way of communicating. So we'll stop for a minute. So we're speaking about communication in quantitative. There is two persons or two destinations of communication, one to the other. They're separate, see? Now, in resonance, we said when communication occurs, something strange happens. First, they both become the same. So here, communication is not communication between two persons. It's a oneness. Each one becomes the other. It's a oneness. So actually, when you communicate with nature, there's oneness. And we are going to go very deep into that. All those points are very important because in the whole system of quantity and quality is differentiated by those things. In quality, when you communicate, you both become each other. So each one is the sum of both. This is the way of communication. So communication in quantity, communication is giving and receiving. In quality, communication is becoming. You don't communicate with something, you become that thing. Energy-wise, you see, they both become that. So and in this state where they both are the same, they have both changed a bit so that each is the sum of both. It's there. So it's a very it's a very simple concept. To us now, we have to study it. It's very exciting. But look at it in a different point of view. There's a nice book. It's called The Gnostic Jung. I don't know the publisher, but it's called The Gnostic Jung, and it shows how Carl Gustav Jung. This is very good because I lived in Zurich a long time, studied there and all that, so Jung was there along the road when I was at university. That tells you how old I am or how young I am. But you know, in quality, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. So.
That's how wise you are.
No, because it's just all there. It never went away. So you feel Jung, that's Zurich where I was, and then Gnostic. This is the Gnosticism. It's the path of knowledge that started in Egypt about 300 years before Christianity, and it somehow was the ground that received Christianity in Egypt. So when Jesus was a child and he came with Mary and they came to Egypt, they escaped the Roman persecution and came to a place where people were, the Gnostics were there with a kind of a religion that wasn't exactly like the Jewish religion. It was a religion based on knowledge. It was a remnants, what was left of the ancient Egyptian sciences. But why do we say the Gnostics? Because they had lost the sciences themselves of the temple. They didn't have them anymore. But they had the way of thinking. So it was, let's say, the way of knowledge. But the sciences itself on which that knowledge was based was already in the past. Why was it already in the past? I mean, why did it go away? Now, let's look at what Jung said. Jung made a sort of differentiated development in consciousness according to the right and left brain consciousness and according to waking consciousness and subconscious and all that. And he made sort of 4 types of humanity. He said we have, in the beginning, we have primitive man. Primitive man is mainly a right brain type consciousness. Doesn't mean that the left part of the head was empty. I mean that they had half a brain and the rest was air. No, it just means that this one was very dominant. The other was still there when you wanted to hold something, to lift something. The other one was still there. But the focus of consciousness from where everything was perceived was in the right brain. What's the difference between right brain consciousness and left brain consciousness? The right brain consciousness is a sort of, it is beyond the senses. It's expansive. It's receptive. It's the sort of perception that has to do with overall things. You perceive patterns. You perceive overall things. It has no, let's say, it doesn't go into details. It goes into the relationship between things. So the invisible between the objects becomes as important as the objects themselves because it forms the pattern. In a right brain consciousness, for example, you would understand that in any molecule like this, you know, a molecule, a chemical molecule at school, we draw something like this and something like this, you know, some atoms like that, and they're related to each other. Now you could have the same type of atoms, let's say carbon and oxygen, into different configurations like this, and they would give you, although they're the same in type, the element could be here just carbon and oxygen, here just carbon and oxygen. Just a difference in number and a different in geometrical pattern would give you a different substance. So the qualities of substances here are not depending on the qualities of the constituents only. They depend on the pattern, overall pattern of arrangement and number. Pattern was numbers part of pattern. So the pattern itself is the thing that shows its quality. Because really, in a molecule or in an atom, the components here are negligible. They're less than 0.1% of the whole, so they really don't play such a role. But it's how they're arranged. So patterns here, the qualities of life, if we want to understand them, we go into this instead of looking with the left brain conscious at the components. This is this element and this element and this is that. We go out and look at the shape. It is this shape, or it is that shape, or it is that shape. That's right brain conscious by, and how does this shape affect me? You see, now if you would go to somebody who's a chemist who's doing, and then you look at the molecules and judge them by shape, by how you feel, what this shape tells you. They'll think you're crazy. But in reality, you could draw this on your hand, the shape of a molecule, or look at it in a book, and we can measure what happens to your energy field. So this will show you that although it's just drawn on paper, it will show you this effect of the right. Now, this is what makes this holistic way of looking at things. Now, when you look holistically at things, like I said, the left brain is still working because the senses mainly, when they limit things, they analyze things and all that, it's mainly left brain perception. So it's still working for your senses. This side works when you daydream. So this holistic way of looking at things, first of all, it's relaxing. The left brain has to focus and analyze. So for our senses to create our left brain perception like that all day, there's a certain amount of stress. And we're like a projector. We could get hot at the end of the day and have to sleep because we get tired, you see. So this right brain perception, since it's holistic, it gives me a sense of unity with what's around me. So here I have the perception of we. You see, we. And here it starts to analyze. That means if you want to analyze something, you have to separate it from its surroundings. And this is when you start making this and the rest. And then ultimately, I and you. See, but the caveman, the primitive man, didn't have this I. You see, he had the we. So there was all actions. You would find a pattern produced by the whole community. Like when you see birds flying, when you see things like that, the community somehow, it's as if one mind is governing them. They produce the same patterns and they move. And there's the sense of I here is very weak, and the sense of we is the most important thing. And this way of looking at nature makes you, when you perceive things with a sense of we, that means this we is also not your herd only, but it's the whole nature. So you're in tune with all the forces of nature. It's automatic. You move according to the electromagnetic fields, you move according to the seasons, you move everything. When you build, a bird comes to build a nest or something, it will build a nest here the way another similar bird will build it in the other side of the world. Why? Because the bird wants to create a certain energy quality, and that is coming from where to it? It cannot analyze. It is the laws of the universe, the natural laws, that manifest through its brain and produce the most suitable material and form of nest for this species. And that way, if it's the same bird, it's the same laws of nature. So they always produce the same things that are best for the species. So you see, when you're here, it's being, you're one with nature. It's nature speaking through you. Now, this is what Jung terms primitive man. Now comes another step where he calls, this is ancient man. Ancient man is when a slow shift starts going from the right side to the left side, and a personality starts emerging. Now, but the communication is still open. So consciousness in ancient man is placed equally between both parts now. In primitive man, it was more on the right side. In ancient man, they're both the same. Now, both the same means that the left brain consciousness now has to start expressing itself also. Now, what are its two number? You see, all things, certain numbers, certain motions, certain things, whether it's music, whether it's number, whether all what they do from the left percept colors, sounds, and all that. So at that time with ancient man, you have music, you have mathematics, you have all those things started, you have buildings started. Before that, they used to live in nature. But now humanity is building temples, building things like that. But is that the left brain consciousness? No. To them, there's a very big difference when you have a consciousness that's equally present in right and left, and it uses a number, and the consciousness that's only present in the left, like modern man, and it uses a number. To us, a number is a quantity. To that man who is both, when he puts a 2 or a 3, any number, he sees the link to nature. He sees the quality of number. And that's why when you go into to read the ancient scriptures and all that, many ancient things, there are many numbers that are there. And sometimes you want to take them literally from their quantitative effect. And then come the scientists and tell you, no, all those books now are not right, because, I mean, how can they say, for example, that from Adam to now it's 6,000 years, and now we know the humans, and it's not like that at all. It has nothing to do with all that. It has to do that the people writing in that time were doing it differently. Let's say I have a plate here in front of me, and this plate is full of, let's say, apples. Big plate full of apples. And I want to convey to you the qualities of the apples. So I would say, for example, now, when I stood there and I distributed my 3 apples, you see, they felt this and this and this. Now, and then later on, I would say, yes, but again, when I was giving them my 7 apples, this and this happened. So somebody will come look. Now here's the discrepancy. Because here, they state that the apples were 3. In this context, when they say, for example, when he went there, and he went to the people and he brought a present, 3 apples. Now in this other text, it says he went and gave a present of 7 apples. You see, there's something wrong. Who is right and who's wrong? Now in reality, my plate, somebody discovers that the plate actually had 50 apples. So all of a sudden, this whole thing, that's not like that. When I want to give you a certain quality of the apples, that is reflected in the number 3. So I tell you, when I give you my 3 apples, from the word 3, you understand all about the energy pattern of the apple related to the energy concepts behind the number 3, from a qualitative point of view. So you see, so I use the numbers here to convey. So I have my apples, I can split them in 3s, split them in 7s, split them in every time I split them in different numbers to convey a different concept. Now, if the door closes to the right thing, and we come today and we look at it with a scientific mind, and we come and say all these things are not accurate, or they're nonsense, or not historical, or not, because we don't understand this quality. So when an ancient Egyptian, let's say an ancient man, would write a number, he knew that with this number he was entering into resonance with the whole universe. He was moving it. And I will show you this very explicitly, but if I demonstrate it now, it would be too early. But I'll show you later on how you can find the quality, for example, of any number. One of the ways is very easy. If somebody has a problem, let's say, in any part of his body, and I can diagnose it whichever way you use. I might use a pendulum, somebody might use a biofeedback device, or whatever you do. Then I would tell you, okay, let the person hold his hand out like this. And then I start putting something on his hand, but first something that I know is bad for the body to begin with. I could get white refined sugar or something like that, that I know, to take off the healing aspect out. So I put one bag, and then I put 2, then I put 3, and I keep looking. Somewhere, by the time, most of the times by the time you reach 10, sometimes if you don't find it there, then go to 20, but most of the time it will be somewhere between 1 and 10. You reach, and at a certain number, the problem will disappear. Even the problem could be, let's say something, you could have a strong backache or something that's really troubling you. The moment you put the right number, it will start going away. You put one more and it come back. See, this is a very, very easy way to now you can't say the sugar did it, because we know the sugar doesn't do it. It's the quality of number. See, so when you look at numbers that way, then you must imagine that there were people living on this earth that related everything in the left brain perception, the quantitative world, to the effect with the whole universe. See, and this is very important. When, for example, they came and they drew a lotus. They drew a lotus flower. Now people tell you the Egyptians had no creativity whatsoever, because they kept drawing the same lotus flower in the same proportions and the same colors for 3,000 years. And this creativity comes, you find people saying, yes, because they had their fixed seasons, you know, the flood every year and all that, so they were used to certain rhythms and certain things, so there was no need to be creative. Now, I mean, when I look when I look and see that famous names and professors are saying such nonsense, I mean, the people who had all this civilization, who could build those temples and all those things, couldn't draw 2 different lotuses over. I mean, didn't anybody ever make a mistake? I would say that drawing the same lotus, the same proportion, the same colors for 3,000 years is such a huge feat, you see, because you can't draw a flower now and in 2 minutes draw this, another one that comes out exactly the same. But what happened? They draw a lotus. All of a sudden, they see that the lotus they are drawing starts being in resonance with the drawing itself, because there's a resonance here of shape. Now they see the resonance. Okay. But this drawing will not necessarily be in resonance with another lotus, because it's very natural in drawing going to this lotus. Now, if I could find one drawing, one pattern that would enter into resonance with every lotus, it would be like the template or the laws that are behind the energy concept of every lotus that's coming out. Then it interacts with this environment and it changes, so one becomes different. But the basic pattern is one. That means that would take me from what we call the physical world to what we call the archetypal dimension. Archetypal dimension is where all the laws of creation on which the physical dimension manifests are found. So if a civilization builds its connection and lives on the laws of the archetypal dimension, what happens? First of all, it is not affected by time and space as we know with the quantitative one. It has another qualitative time and space concept. And then you find that's the reason why the Egyptian civilization stayed for thousands of years, and not only 3 or 4, it was probably there. You know, they're fighting every day how old it is. It could be 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is. But after the Egyptian civilization, a pattern emerged. Every civilization was 300-400 years, 300-400 years, and so on, and it keeps shifting. And this is the normal pattern that's here, that what we have today. Every civilization has a certain life cycle between 300 and 400. How come somebody can go up there in center of excellence and stay there? And how come, if they stayed there, how come one day it was lost? Now people tell you, oh, it was lost because at a certain period, I don't know, this Persians attacked Egypt, or then those attacked Egypt and something. Okay, but Egypt was, for 10,000 years, it must have been attacked hundreds of times, and it must have been attacking others for hundreds of times. And there's no reason to find if somebody attacks you that you crumble away. So there must have been another reason there. But let's look at it that way. We have 2 rooms here, the right brain room and the left brain room. Now, in ancient Egypt, I have both rooms there, and the door is open between them. So whenever I do something in this room, it's in relationship with what's in this room. You see? And this is very important. So I'm living this. In ancient Egypt then, when I draw the archetypes of the lotus, when I look at the archetype, I become the lotus. So communication, symbols, hieroglyphics in ancient Egypt were not the way you find in books today. You find in books today this a symbol, a hieroglyph conveys an idea. That's a modern way of looking at things. No, a symbol in ancient Egypt was a way of becoming something else. So communication, you became what you wanted to communicate with. And that's why when they invoked this nature power, they said they were not gods, they were called netters. And the word netter is the root of the word nature. So they were the nature powers. And they used to invoke, Osiris invoked. How come the magicians invoke the gods? This is a modern concept. No? When you make any rhythm, you become the universe, and you are the nature powers, and they are you. So it's a completely different way. You become things. Then something happened, and this I call the great shift. We'll stop 5 minutes, and then I'll tell you what the great shift is. Now, we were speaking about the levels of consciousness. Now, William James, you all know the philosopher William James of last century, he said once that the shift from ancient man to modern man, from right brain consciousness to left brain consciousness, occurred at about 1250 BC. But I wouldn't, again, use quantitative. This is very dangerous because, for example, if I tell you that when the cavemen erected a stone, a man here, this is the origin that later developed into an obelisk or something like that. But obelisks were built thousands of years before the cavemen in Europe even erected menhirs. They were, so maybe in Egypt 20,000 years earlier they were just erecting stones like what we find lately in Europe. Sometime they must have done it very early. So here we can't say dates. This evolution happened at that date. But probably the evolution, for example, from primitive man to ancient man happened in Egypt maybe 20,000 years ago. But in the caveman in Europe, it could have happened only 4,000 years ago. So when you read, we're speaking here about the quality and not from the quantitative sense. Now, what is the next step? I won't spend too much time in ancient Egypt, you know, because it's very interesting when we speak about mummification, when we speak about all those things of how the Egyptians had all those levels, all the entities within us and all the levels. It's very interesting. In the tapes here, in the beginning, I used to put examples, lots of examples. I would speak about the Templars, the Crusade, about the churches in Europe, about the ancient Egyptians, about so many things, just to show things, but not everybody was linked or found resonance with all the examples. So now we simplify them a bit. If you like all the stories and all that, you'll find them in the tape. And we did in Holland once a 2 or 3 day lecture just on the topic of Pythagoras and ancient Egypt, explaining everything in ancient Egypt, how it really was. And it's always, I speak about my ancient Egypt. I don't want to get in conflict with the left-brained Egyptologists. So I speak about my ancient Egypt, the way I live it. So, and they, one of the participants there made the transcript, and he's making a book out of it about Pythagoras and ancient Egypt. So he sent it to me to revise it. I'm just looking at it, and I'll put a 1-page introduction, and it should be ready very, very soon about this aspect of ancient Egypt. Or maybe sometime next year or something, we might make a special seminar about going into those temple sciences, because they're very interesting, especially for those mystically minded. It's very interesting. Now, what is in, when we speak about the great shift, usually we mean the polar shift. We mean when you had the North Pole and then it moved, and you find that there are many buildings that if you find some foundations of ancient monuments that have alignments with a difference to the pole, then you can know that these were there before the polar shift. They're remnants of building before. So the polar shift is a very important thing when people are looking from the physical point of view at things. But to me, the great shift is not the polar shift. To me, the great shift is more important. It's the shift in consciousness, the shift in perception. It's the day the door closed between both rooms. You see? The day the door closed. Now number 2 means 2. Doesn't mean more than 2. 3 means 3. You see, it's just quantitative now. Letters are letters. Sounds are sounds. But in that room, every letter is supposed to be sort of like a sample or something that links to a power of the universe. So when I write something, I'm moving the powers of the universe with me. Now that has been lost, because now we take the practical aspect of things. So this closing of the door, this is, to me, the great shift in perception. Now the door is closed. You don't have the link to the powers of the universe. You can't use them anymore, because how did you use them? You didn't sort of connect or with the powers to use them. You became them. You see, you could be anything in the universe and act accordingly. Now the door is closed, and what in that time was, there was no separation when you still had the right brain consciousness. There was no separation between science, religion, this and that, all aspects of life. When we speak today about ancient Egyptian sciences, ancient Egyptian religion, it's nonsense. It was a whole thing, a way of life. Religion means belief. Now, you believe in something when you don't see it. But when you see it and you're in it, I mean, why tell you about belief? Because it's in front of you. You see it. You're using it. So then it becomes a practical way of life in harmony with the universe. There's nothing called believing, because you touch it, it's there. Now when the door closed, a new era emerged now. Some people would get the messages from the other side, from the other room, or they have been into the other room, and they tell us what is behind that closed door. You see? So we enter in an area now, or in a time. The great shift is a shift where we have to believe in something that we don't see. And this is a huge shift, because now we believe. And when the door is closed and somebody's telling me that you have to believe that this is behind that door, everybody, although what's inside the door is the same, but if 5 people open the door and look and come out and tell us what they see in there, each one will tell it in a different way. They actually mean the same thing, what's behind the door. But somehow we take the differences. You know, Ibrahim is an Egyptian, he's a Muslim, he told me what's behind the door, he said that. No, but Madhu said different, you know. But, and this one's a Christian, said different, this one's a Jew, he said different. Now who's right? I mean, it's something is wrong up there. Instead of looking at what's behind the door, and that's this believe means look behind the door, we take believe as a way, as if believe in my story here, and forget about the door completely. That is what modern man is. Modern man, the way Jung describes it, is this shutting of the door. He describes it differently. He doesn't say a room and the door and all that. Maybe I'm an architect, I speak in rooms and doors. But he says this is a denial of the right brain consciousness. And this, it's not something arises out of anything. It's just normal. Once you shift too much, now the shift goes completely into the left brain, the sense of I becomes very strong. You see, in the ancient Egyptian, the ego was there as a spokesman of the universe, still acting in this life, inventing new sciences and everything, but always in context of what's there. Now, all of a sudden, the ego has become very strong, and I develop a personality, modern man. When I develop a personality, the first thing that it shows me, it differentiates between me and you. And as we develop, now our modern society is developing, the shift is getting more accentuated every day, and you feel that between generations already. Maybe the older ones among us, they would still feel when there was a day when you felt the I and we felt the family as a we. You felt your neighborhood, you felt your city, even your country. You had something to do with your country. There was this balance between me and all those we aspects. But now it's moving. You see your children and your grandchildren, and things are moving in such a way that there's only I. Nothing else is there, you see. This is the most important thing in life. And it tends to make such a strong separation that the we is not there anymore, you see. And we might say, no, this is what's happening, this is the American way of life, but maybe when you go back, you tell me in India we don't have it, or in Egypt we still don't have it. I know we don't have it in India and in Egypt, but it will come. It has to come. And it's not coming because we are going to be influenced by the American way of life. It has nothing to do with that. It has to come because the consciousness, the more you learn specialized things, the more you use a calculator, the more you train your specialized thing, the more you pull your perception into the left brain.